while I'm doing the weather. So it was all it just evolved.
The candlelight flickered softly as Nicole Kidman stood silently by her father's casket, her hands folded tightly, face pale and still. That day, Sydney was cold, but not as cold as the silence in her heart. No cameras, no red carpets, no lights, just a daughter saying goodbye to the man who shaped her soul. Antony Kidman wasn't a celebrity. He never appeared on magazine covers, never walked any red carpets, but he was her foundation, a psychologist, a teacher, a thinker, and above all, a quiet force in her life. When he died suddenly in Singapore in 2014, Nicole's world collapsed. Not in scandal, not in spectacle, but in a silence that only true grief knows. She once said, "He was the reason I could face the world." And then one day, he was just gone. In today's story, we go behind the scenes of Hollywood's most private actress to uncover the intimate, untold story of Nicole Kidman and the quiet brilliance of the man who made her who she is. Nicole Mary Kidman didn't grow up in the glow of flashbulbs or the echoes of applause. She was born on June 20th, 1967, in Honolulu, Hawaii, an unusual birthplace for a girl who would one day become one of Australia's most treasured actresses. Her father, Dr. Antony Kidman, was in Hawaii on a research assignment. Her mother, Janelle, was a dedicated nursing educator and later a passionate advocate for women's rights. Theirs was a household of intellect, curiosity, and quiet discipline. When Nicole was 4, the Kidman family returned to Sydney, where her parents resumed their careers in academia and public health. Their home was filled with psychology books, medical journals, and dinner table conversations about ethics, resilience, and the human mind. While many children grew up with lullabies or cartoons, Nicole was raised on the language of introspection and understanding. Her father's profession as a clinical psychologist taught her about emotions, but more importantly, about listening. Despite being naturally shy and reserved, Nicole discovered an unusual form of liberation on stage. Her first taste of acting came during ballet classes, but it was drama that lit a fire in her. As a teenager, she enrolled in the Australian Theatre for Young People, where her instructors immediately saw something special, a quiet force, emotionally rich, intensely focused. At just 16, she landed her first movie role in Bush Christmas, followed quickly by roles in BMX Bandits and several Australian TV series. But acting was never just a hobby. For Nicole, it was a lifeline, a channel to express everything she felt but rarely said. As she transitioned from local productions to international acclaim, her performances remained grounded in truth. Dead Calm marked her Hollywood debut, and it was her role opposite Tom Cruise in Days of Thunder that catapulted her into the global spotlight. By her early 20s, Nicole Kidman was no longer the daughter of scholars. She was a rising star. Still, she never abandoned the foundation laid by her parents. She brought their values into every role: empathy, precision, and a deep understanding of human nature. Her portrayal of Virginia Woolf in The Hours earned her an Academy Award. In Moulin Rouge, she sang of doomed love with aching vulnerability. In Big Little Lies, she channeled the silent suffering of abuse survivors with terrifying realism. Yet through all this, Nicole never sought the spotlight for its own sake. She rarely gave interviews, she avoided gossip. Her greatest performances always hinted at something personal, something deeper, something perhaps only her family understood. Her mother, Janelle, was the first to tell her she could do anything. Her father, Antony, rarely praised, but always believed. Together, they created a woman both tender and unbreakable. And while the world saw an actress at the height of her fame, Nicole herself often said, "What I am comes from home." He never wore a suit on television. He never stepped on stage or signed autographs. But in Nicole Kidman's life, Antony Kidman was the most important man she would ever know. Born in 1938 in Australia, Dr. Antony David Kidman was a man of exceptional intellect and quiet command. A clinical psychologist, author, and respected academic, he dedicated his life to understanding the human mind, not for fame, but for healing. At the University of Technology, Sydney, where he worked for decades, he was known not only for his research, but also for his compassion. He taught, counseled, and wrote with a single mission: to help people cope with pain. At home, he was no different. Nicole would later describe him not as strict, but as deep. He wasn't the kind of father who gave long lectures. Instead, he would ask a single question and let silence do the work. He believed in the strength of vulnerability, the power of conversation, and the dignity of listening. In a household driven by intellect, his was the calmest voice, and often the most powerful. While Janelle managed the daily rhythms of the home, Antony shaped the emotional core. He had a habit of reading aloud to his daughters, philosophy, poetry, even Shakespeare, believing that language, like emotion, needed to be felt, not just understood. Nicole often sat on the carpet as a child, legs crossed, chin in hand, listening to her father read about the tragedies of Greek heroes or the tenderness in a Rainer Maria Rilke poem. But he wasn't a distant intellectual. Antony was also the father who biked with Nicole through the parks of Sydney, who held her hand when she had nightmares, who whispered, "You'll be fine, darling," before school exams. He was there when she broke down after her first onstage rejection, reminding her that failure is only failure if you stop trying. Still, when Nicole told him she wanted to become an actress professionally, there was a pause. Antony, the man who believed in stability and logic, was deeply concerned. He said, "It's a hard world, not always fair." But he didn't forbid her. Instead, he handed her a journal and said, "If you're going to do this, make sure you understand who you are." Years later, Nicole would say that gift was more valuable than any advice, because it taught her that acting, like psychology, was about the human condition. Their bond wasn't loud. They didn't need to talk every day, but Antony followed every performance, read every review. Nicole often recalled how after particularly difficult roles, he would send short messages, sometimes just one line: "You went deeper this time." One of the few photos Nicole ever shared publicly of her father showed him not in a lecture hall or at an awards ceremony, but in their garden, wearing a sun hat, reading a book. That was who he was. Steady, gentle, anchored. A man who didn't need to be seen to leave a legacy. In a world full of noise, Antony Kidman was the silence that held everything together. And for Nicole, his presence was never about grand gestures, but about the small moments: a hand on her shoulder, a line in a letter, a gaze of quiet pride from the audience. She would later say, "He wasn't interested in who I became on screen. He cared about who I was off it." But fate would soon cut that connection short. It wasn't an illness anyone saw coming. It wasn't something the cameras caught. One ordinary day, far from home, Nicole's foundation cracked, and nothing was ever the same again. It was a regular September day in 2014. Nicole was in the middle of a tight filming schedule, preparing for a new role that demanded every ounce of her emotional strength. Then the phone rang. A call from Singapore. It was her sister, sobbing. "Dad's gone." Antony Kidman had traveled to Singapore to visit Antonia, Nicole's younger sister. He seemed healthy. There were no signs of illness. They had gone out for dinner the night before. He laughed, told stories, hugged his daughter goodnight. But in the early hours of the next morning, everything changed. He collapsed inside the hotel room. A sudden cardiac arrest. The fall caused severe injuries. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late. Dr. Antony Kidman was pronounced dead on the scene. He was 75 years old. News spread fast, but Nicole stayed silent. No press statement, no tears in public, only a brief, trembling confirmation from a family spokesperson. Nicole and her family are in shock. They ask for privacy during this difficult time. For Nicole, the world blurred. She abandoned the film set and flew home immediately, not to Sydney, but to Singapore. Not to attend a premiere, but to identify her father's body. Sources close to the family said Nicole collapsed when she saw him. It wasn't just grief, it was disbelief. Just days earlier, they had spoken. She had planned to see him the following week. And now he was lying before her, silent and cold. What made the pain worse was the suddenness. There was no goodbye, no final words, no time to prepare. Antony had always been the strong one, the steady presence, the man who never missed a beat. And now he had disappeared in a single heartbeat. For the first time in her career, Nicole pulled out of all public appearances. She declined red carpet events, interviews, and even the Emmy Awards where she was nominated. Her absence wasn't loud, it was devastatingly quiet, just like the man she had lost. Behind the scenes, Nicole made the necessary arrangements to bring her father's body back to Australia. The logistics were painful, the process bureaucratic, but she handled every step personally, determined, even in her grief, to honor the man who had shaped her soul. There were rumors, whispers about medication, stress, fatigue, but Nicole never addressed them. For her, the truth was simple. He died because his heart stopped, but he lived because he gave us his. Years later, in a rare interview, Nicole would say that she still feels his presence. "Some days I pick up the phone and almost dial him," she admitted, tears in her voice. "It's like a cruel trick the brain plays, forgetting that he's gone just so it can hurt again." Antony Kidman's death wasn't the kind that filled tabloids. There was no scandal, no spectacle, just a sudden void. A brilliant mind extinguished in an instant. And for his daughter, it was the kind of loss that doesn't scream. It settles quietly into your bones and never leaves. The sun hung low over Sydney that day, casting a golden hue over the city. But for Nicole Kidman, everything felt gray. On September 19, 2014, the funeral of Dr. Antony Kidman was held at St. Francis Xavier Church in North Sydney, the same parish where the Kidman family had worshipped for decades. It was a modest Catholic ceremony, per the family's wishes. No massive floral arrangements, no fanfare, just quiet, dignity, and grief. Nicole arrived early with her husband, Keith Urban, and their 2 daughters. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back tightly, almost as if to hold herself together. At her side was her mother, Janelle, frail but composed. Nicole didn't let go of her hand once. Though many expected a star-studded event, the guest list remained intimate. A few close friends from Hollywood came in quietly, sitting at the back. The pews were filled not with celebrities, but with patients Antony had once counseled, former students, fellow researchers, and community members. People who knew him not as Nicole's father, but as Dr. Kidman, the man who had changed their lives without asking for anything in return. A soft choir sang hymns as the ceremony began. Nicole sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the wooden casket at the altar. No tears, at least not publicly, but her stillness spoke louder than any sob could. It was the stillness of someone carrying too much pain, someone trying not to fall apart in front of the world. Her sister, Antonia, gave the first eulogy. She spoke of a father who listened more than he spoke, who taught without lecturing, who loved without needing to prove it. Nicole followed next. When she stood at the lectern, a hush fell over the room. She didn't read from notes. Her voice was quiet, deliberate. My father was a man of deep thought and deeper love. He never needed the spotlight, but he gave us the strength to walk into it. Every time I step on a set, I carry his belief in me. Then she paused. Her voice cracked. He called me his wildflower. And now I feel like I've lost the sunlight. The room fell into a soft wave of muffled weeping. Even those who had never met Antony could feel the depth of loss in his daughter's voice. After the ceremony, the casket was carried out by 6 men, 3 colleagues, 2 friends, and Keith Urban. Nicole walked behind, holding her mother's arm, her eyes hidden behind large, dark glasses. The burial took place at a nearby cemetery. The press were kept at a distance, but a few long-lens photographs later emerged, showing Nicole kneeling by the grave, one hand touching the headstone, the other holding a folded piece of paper. It was later revealed that the letter was written on hotel stationery from Singapore, her final message to her father, penned just hours after his death. As the family took their last moments, the church bells rang. Not loud, but low and heavy. Nicole stood, bowed deeply, and whispered a prayer. There were no red carpets, no closing credits, just a daughter, a mother, and a goodbye that no one was ready to say. After the funeral, Nicole Kidman disappeared. No interviews, no public appearances, no social media. For nearly 6 months, she stepped out of the spotlight, not as an actress retreating from fame, but as a daughter mourning a man the world never truly saw. Close friends described her as hollow. She canceled film offers, declined red carpet invitations, and withdrew from major industry events, including the 2014 Emmy Awards, where she was expected to make a splash. Instead, she stayed home, with her mother. In interviews years later, Nicole would reveal that she moved her mother, Janelle, into her Nashville home right after Antony's death. "We needed each other," she said. "My mother lost her husband. I lost my foundation." For months, she focused solely on being present, waking up early, cooking, sitting in silence with the woman who had now lost her partner of over 4 decades. But the silence wasn't empty. It was a space of reflection and rebuilding. When Nicole finally returned to acting, it wasn't for glamour, it was for healing. Her next projects took on a new emotional weight. In Lion, she portrayed an adoptive mother struggling with identity and loss, a role that mirrored her own fractured emotional state. Critics noted a new intensity in her performances, a rawness that hadn't been there before. She wasn't acting grief, she was channeling it. She also began speaking more openly about mental health, grief, and the quiet devastation of losing a parent. In one heartfelt interview, she admitted, "People think the pain fades. It doesn't. It just becomes part of you." She poured herself into charity work, especially causes her father once supported. She funded psychology scholarships in his name, contributed to hospitals in Sydney, and quietly launched a reading program for underprivileged children. believing, as her father did, that education was the truest path to empowerment. But perhaps the most profound shift was personal. Nicole stopped chasing career highs. She chose roles not for prestige, but for meaning. She spent more time with her daughters, and she never missed a chance to mention her father in speeches, not as a tribute, but as a way of keeping him close. She said softly, "I carry him with me. Every word I say, every choice I make, it's still a conversation with him." In losing her father, Nicole lost a part of herself. But in that space, she also discovered something more enduring, the invisible bond that outlives even the final goodbye.
Sometimes the people who shape us most are the ones the world never sees. Nicole Kidman built a career on portraying pain, love, resilience, but it was her father who first taught her what those words truly meant. His death didn't break her, it deepened her, gave her performances a haunting truth, made her silence feel louder than applause. She never turned her grief into spectacle. She carried it, quietly, letting it live in the roles she chose, in the stories she told, in the pauses between her words. And through that, her father lives on, not just in memory, but in meaning. Perhaps that's the truest legacy any parent can leave. Not wealth, not fame, but values. A voice that whispers even after it's gone. A light that stays on long after the room goes dark. And maybe we all have someone like that. Someone whose absence feels louder than their presence ever did. Who was that person for you? Tell us your story in the comments, and if this touched something in you, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next tribute we bring to life.